Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Marybeth Lima and I am the author of Adventures of a Louisiana Birder, 1 year, 2 wings, 300 species. I am excited to be here this afternoon and I'm really thankful for LSU Press for asking me to go ahead and do this. What I'm going to do is talk for several minutes just to give folks a chance to get online. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the book and a couple of announcements, and then I will go ahead and get started with the reading. So if you look sort of behind me, what you are looking at is my home office. And this is where I did all of the writing for the book. So I started the book in 2013, and I took notes on birds and birders and Louisiana for about 4 years. And then I did the bulk of my writing here in this office in the summer of 2017. And I did most of the editing in 2018. I can start to see from the chat box that folks are starting to join. Again, if you're just joining, I am trying to give folks a couple minutes to get online. So I'm talking a little bit about the book. Going to talk about a couple of announcements and then move into the reading. So welcome to the home office. This is where I created the book. You can see the window behind me. It's probably too bright to see, but there's a couple of trees right in the back. And so I also got to write with the company of great crested flycatchers and blue jays and Carolina wrens, which was wonderful. So in terms of what this book is about, when I started this process, I really intended to shine a light on Louisiana, which I think is a wonderful state to bird, and it's also underappreciated. Most birders talk about Florida and Texas and California, and those are all wonderful places in this country to bird. Louisiana is as well, but it's a little bit underappreciated. So I really started by trying to shine a light on the state, and I thought at the beginning that if I had a random birder who was from another part of the country and read this book and thought to themselves, wow, I really want to visit Louisiana to go see the great birds that are there. It sounds like a beautiful place, and I want to meet some of those cool, awesome Louisiana birders. I would have considered that a smashing success. So that's what I started to do. But I had a couple of life events that were challenging that happened while I was working on this book. And so the end product is something I'm super proud of. But I will say there's a whole lot more memoir in the book than I anticipated when I started. So one announcement, one of the challenges that I did go through that's detailed in this book was I was involved in a boat accident and I was fine, but my partner Lynn, my wife, was burned. And so that situation actually reminded me a whole lot of COVID and what is happening now with our lives. And the reason it was sort of parallel is that my life changed quickly and unexpectedly and dramatically. And for a period of time, I was sort of confined to the house and wasn't used to living life the way I typically was used to. So it reminded me a whole lot of COVID in those ways. And I asked the LSU Press to make that chapter available for free download. So I'm so grateful again that the press agreed to do that. And so you can access one of the 8 chapters on this book with the idea, I would hope, that if you're struggling with COVID, that maybe you'd find a little solace in reading that chapter. So if you go onto the LSU Press website and you search for my book, either by my name, Marybeth Lima, or by the book title, Adventures of a Louisiana Birder, you're going to pull up the site. And there is a tab called Press Kit. And if you click on the Press Kit tab, you're going to have several links that open up. And the middle one is called PDF Download. And that is the chapter that describes that situation with the burn. So I think we've got some folks, most of our folks on. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to do 2 short readings. And I'll let you know when the first one's over. If you've got questions for me, I'm going to ask y'all to put them in the chat box. And then after I finish the second reading, I'm going to start answering those. I will answer all of them. If there is interest, I can happily do an excuse me, an encore reading. And there's also a little photo array that the press put together that mentions, that has pictures of some of the birds and wildlife that I'm about to talk about in the reading. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Both of these readings come from Chapter 5, and the reason I selected both of them is that they occur at almost the same time of year that we're in right now. And so it's starting to get pretty hot, and Louisiana is a great time to, a great state to bird in at any time of year, but the summer can get sort of brutal with the heat. And so with that, I'm gonna go ahead with reading number 1. We also planned short chase trips for needed birds. For example, when Janine Robin posted about baby screech owls she was observing daily in a wood duck nest box in her backyard, I contacted her immediately to see if we could yard crash. She assented, and on June 1st, we rode over to the tiny village of Folsom after Lynn got out of work. Janine came out to greet us as we pulled in her driveway and took us to her backyard, which consisted of 3 acres of birding paradise. Feeders were everywhere, with lots of colorful gardens, open expanses of grass, and a tall tree line that surrounded the back of her property. Janine led us to where the ground level dipped toward a low swampy area that didn't quite look like a ditch, but could become one during a good rain. The nest box was located in this low area and close to a small pond. Janine positioned us at the edge of this land, just before the dip and about 30 feet away from the nest box opening. "Let's just watch the hole," Janine said. "They show themselves every so often. I haven't seen them yet today, but it's getting toward evening, and this is a good time to see them." We stood together, scrutinizing the hole. Although there was no action, the birds in the tangle of brush and short trees in the immediate vicinity provided plenty of ancillary entertainment. Janine ticked off several bird species while we waited, including yellow-billed cuckoo, hooded warbler, and summer tanager. When the whistled song that ends with what sounds to me like, "Here, here, pitch it here," rang from the floor of the pseudo ditch, I smiled broadly and declared, "Swainson's warbler." "Yep," Janine agreed. "Yes," said Lynn. We happily added +1 to Lynn's year list. A few minutes later, I saw movement in the nest box hole. I immediately lifted my binoculars, and when I focused them, I got the briefest glimpse of gray feather down and a yellow eye. Owl! By the time Janine and Lynn trained their binoculars on the hole, the edge of owlet face I'd seen had withdrawn. We stayed focused on the hole for the next 10 minutes with no action whatsoever. Just as Lynn started joking that I must have hallucinated, a tiny head reappeared. All 3 of us chuckled as the owlet stuck its face even farther out of the box, and we collectively took in breath as a second face appeared behind the first. 4 eyes looked to the south in the same direction in which we'd heard the Swainson's warbler. We were as quiet and unmoving as they were, just watching them as daylight continued its leisurely summertime baton pass toward evening. The first owlet retreated, and a second remained, beginning to move its neck around to consider its surroundings. A second head reappeared, and Janine said, "Hey, that one is more red than the other 2. I think it might be a third." I knew I had 2 owlets in there. I didn't realize that I might actually have 3. Lynn and I left a few minutes later to take the long way home. Normally, we'd return the way we came on I-12, which runs east-west just north of Lake Pontchartrain. We elected instead to drive south across the Causeway Bridge to I-10. The reason? An unexplained phenomenon that started in 2015. Decent numbers of pelagic birds known as brown boobies had decided to spend the summer in the vicinity of the causeway in Lake Pontchartrain. For all we know, they could be spread across the lake, but most were spotted by birders as they drove the 26-mile road that connected the New Orleans suburb of Metairie to the small city of Mandeville. For the past several years, boobies had been spotted on the length of the causeway, but especially around mile marker 16, which was close to the middle of the lake toward the Mandeville side. Boat trips to this area produced sightings of 15 to 35 boobies. They seemed to like the concrete bridge structure at this juncture, where their perching locations were not visible from the bridge, but were fully visible from a boat. Even so, many flew around the area and were visible to vehicular traffic. We took a jaunt over the causeway and kept our eyes peeled, especially between miles 17 and 16, but no brown booby. So that's the end of the first reading. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me, I'm thrilled to answer them. I'm going to move to the second reading, which has occurred a couple of weeks later. And again, once I'm done with that, I will start looking in the chat box and I will start answering any questions that y'all have. In mid-June, we took a quick trip after work to the Wrigley's for Lynn to kayak fish. On the way, we pit stopped at New Orleans City Park, where we zoned in on Tad Gormley Stadium to see if we could locate year-round resident monk parakeets. We heard them calling as soon as we pulled up, and within 1 minute, we observed one of the big green tropical birds. The parakeets had constructed their condo homes in almost every light fixture in the stadium. We stayed about 5 minutes, counting several, then proceeded to the Wrigley's Marina in Slidell. We launched our kayaks and paddled toward the Gauguin Canal, where Lynn caught speckled trout. There likely would have been more fish in the box, but an impending summer thunderstorm cut our trip short. We started home by traveling north up Highway 11. Lynn stopped at a pull-off across the street from the Irish Bayou truck stop. A man of indeterminate age and ethnicity was sitting on an ancient lawn chair, the kind popular in the 1970s, with brown and yellow webbing. He greeted us when we pulled up, and Lynn, upon seeing the fishing pole in his hand, uttered the standard Louisiana fishing greeting. "Doing any good?" The man said no, stroked his long beard once, and popped his cork, also known as a bobber, in frustration. Lynn got out her pole to fish the grassy water edges for redfish, as it appeared to be picture-perfect habitat for them. She fished for 20 minutes with no bites, and Bearded Guy hadn't gotten any either. Lynn announced, "Time to get home to Mom," so we packed it in, but when Lynn turned the key, the truck didn't start. Lynn thought it was a dead battery and cursed when she realized that our set of jumper cables was not in the truck. We asked the guy if he had jumper cables, and he said sorry, he didn't. I called AAA and told Lynn she may as well keep fishing while we waited. Soon after, a sedan pulled up to the Bearded Fisherman, likely to discuss the day's fishing report. Within 30 seconds, the sedan moved on to us, and the man inside rolled down his window and said, "Heard y'all need jumper cables." When Lynn said we did, he replied that he had some, angled his car in front of our truck, and exited to begin setting up the cables. All of a sudden, the Bearded Fisherman started yelling. At first, I couldn't tell what he was saying, and I wasn't sure if he was yelling in general or yelling so that we could hear him, but he pointed out over the water. As I followed his finger, what he was saying registered. "Hey, that's a caiman! Caiman!" I saw what looked to me like an alligator, about 5 feet long, that was swimming toward Lynn's bright orange cork. I removed the fishing pole from the holder in which Lynn had left it before tending to the truck and reeled it in quickly. The last thing you want is a gator on your hook. Lynn had once hooked a small alligator that attacked her cork, and it had taken quite a bit of finesse and opening and closing of the bail to get the gator detached safely. We still have that cork, replete with a row of teeth marks to prove it. I'm going to stop here for 1 second because I actually have that cork. Cork with teeth marks. Thwarted in his hunt, the large reptile swam close to shore and turned 90 degrees in the shallows, about 15 feet from the water's edge and right in front of me, close enough that I could observe luminous brown eyes that seemed bigger and lighter than those on the alligators I was used to seeing. The animal's snout seemed to have a little higher ridge than that of a typical gator, too. It almost seemed like the creature was looking right at me. It wasn't shy at all. After regarding me in statue mode for a couple of minutes, the caiman headed toward Bearded Guy's cork. This action produced a monologue of muttering from Bearded Guy. I couldn't hear all of it, but it was something about caiman aggression and who let this thing go, and no wonder there weren't any fish around. Bearded Man reeled in as the caiman closed in on his cork. It stopped about a dozen feet away from Bearded Man, right in front of the vintage lawn chair. The muttering continued as caiman and human seemed locked in a stationary stalemate. The man wasn't moving from his chair, and the caiman appeared to be waiting for a cork, or a fish in the form of a cork. It sure was close. I'd never seen a large reptile cruise so close to a human and square off. It almost reminded me of barracuda and the way that they square off with you when you're snorkeling. They don't attack you, but they don't retreat either. They just look at you head to head, and they'll maneuver with you to keep that head-to-head configuration. Meanwhile, Lynn and the guy in the sedan, who introduced himself as Lewis, had finished connecting the cables. "Crank it," he said to Lynn, and our truck started up right away, like a dream. We had to let it run for a while, but instead of leaving, Lewis stayed, and he and Lynn started into a fishing conversation that I understood only part of. Even though I didn't follow all the technical terms, I understood that they were trading love the same way that I do when talking birds with a fellow birder. Fluorocarbon or monofilament, bait caster or spinning reel, silver or gold spoons, Carolina or Texas rigs, nuances in bouncing jig heads off the bottom, the location of favorite fishing holes. "I used to fish every day after work," Lewis said, "and then I got promoted. I needed the extra money, and it's been great for me and my family, but it takes away time from fishing. I haven't fished in forever, but I still stop by on my way home from work to see what other people are catching. And it's nice to be able to help out a fellow fisher person in need." We tried to buy Lewis a six-pack from across the street, but he was having none of it. So we shook hands and said our goodbyes, including to Bearded Man, who waved perfunctorily while still staring down the caiman. As we headed home via the causeway, I canceled our AAA call and looked up the term caiman. I was shocked to see, upon looking at pictures, that the bearded fisherman was correct. I had never heard of a caiman, much less seen one in the state. Caimans are in the same family as alligators and crocodiles, but are in a different genus. Smaller, thinner, and often more aggressive than alligators. They are not native to Louisiana, but people keep them as pets. I wondered if the bearded man's mutterings were true, that someone had released a caiman that had grown too large to be a pet, and it was now patrolling the waterways, gorging on popping corks and native fish. Brown booby try across the causeway. Brown pelican, yes. Brown booby, no. So that's the end of the second reading, and what I'm going to do now is just start scrolling down the bar. Again, if you haven't brought in questions yet, please feel free to now, and I will answer them as they go. I see oh my God, I can't believe you saw a caiman in Lake Pontchartrain. So if you do look at the pictures that were posted to go with this reading, you'll see a picture of, I think it's a caiman. It's not the caiman that we had 4 years ago, but interestingly, we fairly recently stopped there. And at that same spot, and the Irish Byre truck stop has actually burnt down in that time, but there's still the pull-off where people can fish. And when we pulled in, we saw a couple of what looked like caimans and shot those pictures. So that might be the caiman just 3.5 years later, or it might not be, who knows, but yes, it's still there. So one question is, how many birds are on your list now, and which bird are you most excited about seeing? Yeah, so listers count birds in lots of different ways. And so the book actually goes through sorry about that, yeah. The book actually goes through a series of something called a big year, which is you choose a geographical location and you try to see as many bird species as you can in a calendar year. So my book actually contains 2 big years, both in Louisiana. And I was trying to shoot, especially the second time we did one when I actually knew what I was doing a little bit more. I was really trying to shoot for 300 species. And so I don't really have any plans to do a big year, but there are right now 483 birds total on the Louisiana bird list. I think the next time the bird list comes out, there will be 484 because Jane Patterson found a black-capped vireo recently and has lots of documentation, so that will probably be bird 484. And so what I'm working on now list-wise is my state list and just trying to get that number as high as I can. So I've seen a total of 368 bird species in Louisiana. I would love someday to make it to 400, but I know that will likely take decades because essentially only rare birds are left that I have not seen. So the bird that I would love to see in Louisiana, I've seen it in other states, but never in this state, has been the black-throated blue warbler. And that's what I'm hoping to find. It's a migratory bird. It comes through fleetingly. Probably gonna have to wait until next spring. There was actually one for at least 8 days in City Park in Katori this year, but I did not want to travel to see it because of COVID. So next time, there's always next time. Okay, Maggie's asking about good apps or books to use as reference for those of us who are now spending more time at home and seeing more birds than normal. That's been really fun for me to read some of the articles about that, both the fact that there aren't as many people who are out and about, and so there are birds coming into places in more numbers than they have in a while. I think there's a recent story about flamingos on the streets in Mumbai in India, which they have not done in many years. So there's if you go to Cornell University has a great amount of information about birds. There's a website called All About Birds. And then you can sort of read all about different types of birds, how to get started. I would recommend a birding guide. Here in Louisiana, I pick eastern birds, although we get a lot of western ones. It's more eastern birds that you would see. There's an app called Merlin where you can take a picture of a bird and it will give you possibilities for what the bird is. It'll get it right if you have a good picture, but if it's not as clear, it'll give you some ideas. So there's a lot of really great information. I highly recommend Audubon societies. I'd pick up your local Audubon society. There are folks, again, I know with COVID it's a little bit dicey to do bird walks at the moment, but people are really thrilled to get you started. So look at some of the Facebook pages. There's a Gulf Coast Birding Club Facebook page run by David Booth. He's got a nice getting started on birds little course. Jane Patterson does a lot of getting started on birding in the Baton Rouge area. So there's a lot there. That's sort of off the top of my head. And again, y'all, if folks have more questions, you can email me at any time, and I'm gonna type in my email address in the chat. How many birds are on my life list? 778. Again, I'm just thrilled to see whatever's there. Yeah, I even love birds I see all the time. I mean, I absolutely love mockingbirds. I know that a couple of my friends have said mockingbirds have driven them crazy being at home because they sing at all times of the day and they sing a lot. But yeah, I love everyday birds. I love all birds, but yeah, 778 on my life list. My birding activity has been extremely different with the stay-at-home guidelines in place because I have essentially stayed at home. So I remember I studied engineering. I had one female professor the entire time that I was an undergraduate in engineering, and she was a mechanical engineering professor who taught me heat transfer. And I remember she talked about the concept of how 6 inches could be infinity. And that if you are dealing with something that is so tiny, so very tiny, that 6 inches can seem like forever and an age away. So I feel like, infinity for me tends to be defined by the world. And with COVID, I think infinity was the edges of my yard. So I just birded my yard like crazy. I have had a running yard list total where I keep track of the species in my yard. And I started at something like 111 bird species or so and have added 7 since this all started. So that's been really sort of fun to do, but I've tried to really, I recognize that there are lots of different ways to deal with the stay-at-home order. So I interpreted it pretty conservatively, meaning that if I was supposed to stay at home for all the activities except for essential ones, I feel like birding is definitely essential for my mental health, but I can do it in my yard. And so that is what I did for the entirety of the stay-at-home order in the state. But I also recognize that restrictions are starting to lift, and they're different in different states. And I strongly encourage people to get out in nature and bird as long as you're being safe with social distancing and wearing a mask if you run into people. I think birding and just being in nature in general is a wonderful way to just stay calm and centered and focused as we head through this really difficult time in our lives. Mammals I've seen on my birding trips. I guess it sort of depends on the birding trip. Mammals. Yeah, see, all I think like snakes are obviously not mammals, but those come to mind a lot because you sort of run into those sometimes, and most of the time you're ready for them, but sometimes you're not, and it's like, whoa, look out. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, not too many mammals. I guess it would depend. Lynn and I were able to go to Yellowstone earlier it was in February, before the COVID thing really kicked in, and there were actually not too many birds in Yellowstone, especially in the wintertime. But everyone had told us, if you want to go to Yellowstone for wildlife, you should go in the wintertime because there's not as many people in the park. And there were just so many buffalo and elk. We saw wolves. So that was a really amazing trip. And so if you haven't been to Yellowstone, I highly recommend it. And certainly I know it's crowded in the summer and beautiful in the summer, but it's actually spectacularly beautiful in the wintertime. Just wear the right clothes and you'll be gold. So are there any other questions? I am happy to read one more chunk, and I think what I'll do is I'll look at the likes. If I see a bunch of likes, I'll just read this third little section, and if not, then I'm happy to just say thank you for listening, and feel free to read that extra chapter that's on the website page. Okay, I've got enough likes coming that I'm going to go ahead and keep. I'll do one last reading. Okay, so what I'm writing about here is the concept of something that I call a Nemesis bird. So a Nemesis bird is a bird that you've looked for a really long time and you can't find it. And maybe everyone around you has seen it and you haven't, or you've gone searching for it a bunch of times and you never find it. That is a nemesis. And so in the second chapter of this book, I write about a number of birds for me that have been Nemesis birds. And I'm going to read you a story of my Nemesis Cape May Warbler. My obsession with birds has actually drawn in a few other people. Not that I try to convert people, but I guess that even as I attempt to edit myself, I talk enough about birds that I eventually wear down a person here or there. My friend Sarah Myers is one of those people. She and Linda Lee own a condo 2 doors down from us on Dauphin Island, and she watched me take off for the woods and listened to me prattle on about birding too many times to not get interested. Nationally renowned birder Ken Kaufman says that you need to let people bird the way that they want to, that the idea of there being a proper way to bird is silly. I have to keep that in mind with Sarah because she birds by camera. She does not own a pair of binoculars and does not want a pair of binoculars. She has a 50 times zoom on her camera and fresh young eyes to see the screen, and she's good with that, and I am too. I took Sarah birding a few times in the winter and spring of 2013, and she slowly began to build a life list consisting only of birds of which she's taken good pictures. One spring weekend, when she went to Dauphin Island and I didn't go, the Spring Alabama Ornithological Society, AOS, meeting was being held there. Sarah connected with Tom Sheehan, one of her former high school teachers, who happens to be an avid birder and who attends every spring AOS meeting. Sarah ventured out with him and a group of other birders, armed with her camera and ready to tackle the bird world. When she called to tell me that she got a great picture of a Cape May warbler, I about fell off my chair. The Cape May warbler had turned into my most difficult nemesis bird. Louisiana is toward the western edge of the spring migration route of this pretty warbler. And though they are possible to see in Louisiana and are not considered rare here, you can't dial one up at will. Joan has seen a Cape May 3 times on Grand Isle over the course of about 20 years. And at this point, she spends almost the entire month of April birding there. The Cape May was the 44th bird on Sarah's life list. At the time, I was sitting at 425 birds on my life list with no Cape May. I had 42 of the 50 or so warbler species one can find in North America, but not the Cape May. Sarah had also gotten fabulous pictures of a black-billed cuckoo and thought that this was the bird to get because all her birder friends had fawned over the cuckoo, but no one was fawning over the Cape May, so she didn't think she had anything special. When I explained that it made sense that the birders would be more excited about the black-billed cuckoo than the Cape May warbler, I had to explain why my reaction was the opposite and the concept of the Nemesis bird. The rest of the year was hell. There's just no other way to put it. Sarah Myers inserted that Cape May warbler into just about every conversation I had with her, and the fact that she had seen it and I hadn't. For her, that teasing just never got old. I declared my intentions to see a Cape May in 2014, but had no real expectations. Why should this year be any different from the previous 13? That April, Lynn and I were on Dauphin Island during the weekend of the AOS meeting. As with any group of birders, the AOS crew is a friendly lot. John Stowell holds a huge potluck lunch at his house during every meeting, and Sarah always goes. Sarah is an extrovert. I had yet to attend the potluck, and although part of my staying away is the fact that I am less outgoing than Sarah, the bigger concern is that I'd waste a perfectly good hour of birding. I would much more easily consider a potluck if it were in the evening, and the only things worth chasing were owls and nightjars, species that don't see much action on Dauphin Island. Sarah, meanwhile, had managed to convince Linda Lee to get into birding. Linda Lee never does anything halfway. The first thing Linda did when she decided to try birding was to purchase a pair of Eagle Optics binoculars. She headed into the woods for the first time ever with me, Lynn, and Sarah during that AOS weekend. Dauphin Island in April usually sports great birding, even when there are not fallout conditions. We proceeded to the Indian Shell Mound and clicked off several species of warblers, prothonotary, hooded, yellow-rumped, and vireos, white-eyed and red-eyed, as well as the usual selection of buntings, indigo and painted, and tanagers, summer and scarlet. It was a very colorful morning of birding. Sarah and Linda decided to take a break while Lynn and I continued. An hour later, they texted us that they were headed to John Stowell's house for the AOS potluck lunch, and did we want to come? Let's see. Birds in the woods versus 50 people in a closed space. We opted for the woods. 40 minutes later, I received the following text. Sarah, have you seen the Cape May yet? Me, no. Why? Sarah, because I'm looking at one right now at John's house. No joke. Me, is it alive? Sarah, yes. Me, is it in his house? Sarah, no. Me, are you really serious? Sarah, yes. At this point, Lynn texted Sarah on my phone. Given Sarah's propensity for teasing me about the Cape May, we had to be sure. Lynn, Sarah, you're sure you're not kidding? Sarah, I'm not. Really. Come now. We blew out of the bird banding area in the Dauphin Island Bird Sanctuary, jumped into the truck, and headed to the corner of Cadillac Avenue and Pentecourt Street. So many cars lined Cadillac that we had to find a place to park several blocks away and walk back toward the intersection. The first person we saw when we approached was Linda Lee. I got that bird, she said excitedly. I mentally cringed. I understood her excitement, was excited for her, truly, but it was her first day of birding. I felt humbled on a karmic scale. The bottlebrush trees adjacent to John Stowell's yard were easily the most bodacious on the island, and in them, interspersed among dozens of ruby-throated hummingbirds and orchard orioles, with the occasional prothonotary thrown in, was a male Cape May warbler. The area in front of those bottlebrush trees was full of birders, the ones who had eaten lunch and were also treated to the Cape May. Where is it? I thought to myself. I tried not to be white-knuckled while holding my binoculars and tried not to grind my teeth. The birder said that he only disappeared for short times and always came back into clear view. I only had to wait about 3 minutes before one birder said, "There he is." With my heart beating strongly in my chest, I followed the birder's finger and found him with my naked eye. He was downright friendly and eating for all he was worth, at times hanging upside down on the pink bottlebrush flowers. I marveled at his large red cheek spot and the bright yellow collar around his neck. Lynn was able to take fabulous pictures, and I was able to stare at him a long time with and without binoculars. Lots of happy birders lined up in front of those trees, especially me. Sarah found me in front of the trees, gave me a hug, and said, "You know, it was a really tough decision for me to have to give up this one bird I have on you, especially because you turned your nose up at the potluck. I made sure that Linda saw it first, and I made sure that my parents, who are not birders, saw it too. And then I figured I had to call you. And here you go. I got you the Cape May." A gray kingbird was camped out on a power line half a block down Cadillac Avenue, so Lynn and I joined Linda and Sarah to see that bird as well. A gray kingbird is a better bird than a Cape May any day of the week on Dauphin Island, but I didn't care. During a week's vacation 3 summers earlier in Key West, I had been treated to so many gray kingbirds on the wires that they almost felt like a yard bird. It was the first time that I had seen a gray kingbird on Dauphin Island, and I was happy for that. but it was the Cape May that had me elated. After 14 years of birding, I slept better that night. I finally had the coveted Cape May warbler, a male, on my life list. What a looker. All right, y'all, so that's my last reading. If there are any other questions, I'll wait for them and happily answer them. And if not, I will, yeah, I have questions. I was about to say I'll sign off, but I have questions. Okay, the question is, have you ever sighted a bird when you were totally not expecting it, maybe out for errands or something unrelated, and you stumbled across a new bird? Yes, so I guess there's kind of two parts to that. One is I think birds show up a lot. I think they're great because they really fit in amongst humans really well. So I love Mississippi kites. They're a small hawk that spend the summer. They come partway through the spring and they leave really early in the fall in South Louisiana. And I consider that bird sort of my spirit bird. And the reason is that years ago I was building a playground, which is kind of one of the things I do in my professional life. And I was really having a very, very difficult day. We were short volunteers. It was just a tough moment that I was having on this build site. And someone said, look up. And there were 16 Mississippi kites soaring above our heads. And that was a completely unexpected thing for me to see in that particular area at that particular time. And for me, it was just felt like this big message from the universe that, hey, things are okay and it's going to be okay. So that was one really awesome, unexpected time when I saw birds. The other unexpected time is when you catch birds that are rare. In other words, you're not expecting to see them and they show up, and that's really wonderful because you want to let other people know that the birds are there. So a couple of times I have been walking on the beach and I've seen a bird called a glaucous gull, and they're really more on the West Coast, and immature ones sometimes just get lost. They just wander off course. And they're pretty easy to identify because they're super large. The immature glaucous gulls are really big, and they're all white. And so they look like these big white giants compared to other gulls that you would see. And so I have seen those a couple of times on the beach in Alabama, on the beach in Mississippi, and they're just not, they're not normal for there. So of course I get super excited, start texting people to bring them out, take pictures, post them, and try to, let other birders be aware that they're there. So, I've never found anything truly rare, like Jane Patterson, what I mentioned earlier, finding the black-capped vireo here in Louisiana, where it's really typically in hill country in Texas. That's like an amazing find. There's a story in the book about Charlie Lyon finding a mew gull, which tends to, again, be like in Alaska, and he found one in Louisiana, and we got to ride on his boat in Shreveport to go see that gull. So I've never in my travels found anything that rare, but it's still a thrill to find birds that you don't expect, or just the way that, a bird can just sort of do something unexpected that's really fun and cool. And I never get tired of that. One time I was just watching brown pelicans just, sitting on the water, and a laughing gull came down and landed right on a pelican's head. The pelican's like, okay, just kept going. I mean, it's just crazy if you really watch. There's some amazing things that are just every day. Yes, marine mammals on pelagic trips, yes. And there are pelagic trips mentioned in the book, lots of dolphins that you see in blue water when you go on pelagic trips. So yes, that is definitely a mammal that I have seen also during birding. Sharon, yeah, okay, multiple meanings, popping a cork. Okay, so Just a question again, where can we read the extra chapter? What website? Again, LSU Press website. If you look up my book either by my name or by the title, there's a page just for the book. There are several tabs. If you choose the tab that says Press Kit, there's going to be three downloads or three tabs under that, and the middle one says PDF download, and that is that chapter 3, that third chapter. Yeah, Dauphin Island is a wonderful place to bird from. Migratory birds. Coastal zones are great for spring migration. I'll add Louisiana is fantastic on the coast also for spring migration. Okay. Questions: if I had to pick one spot in Louisiana to bird, where would it be? That's a really hard it's a super hard question to answer because it would be tough to pick one spot. Part of it depends on what you're interested in seeing. I love Pevita Woods Sanctuary, which is owned by the Baton Rouge Audubon Society, but it's this around 40 or 50 acre oak chenier located about 17 miles east of the Texas state line on Highway 82. I love going there. You can access a beach there, but they've, that oak chenier, there's a meadow adjacent to it. There's a lot of different habitats there, and it's just a fabulous place to bird, especially in migration. I love the road along Highway 82, but really almost everywhere in the state. We are so blessed in Louisiana with beautiful scenery. There's coastal prairie, there's hardwood forests, there's pine forests, there's hills, there's swamp, there's pelagic, there's a barrier island, Grand Isle. So I think no matter where you are in the state, there are just absolutely wonderful places to bird. Another one I really, really, really love is Turf Grass Road in Jefferson Davis Parish. So if you head on I-10 and I'd be going west from Baton Rouge, you get to exit 48, which means you're, again, 48 miles east of the Texas state line. If you get off of that exit, it's the La Cassine exit. Just north of there, you just kind of take the frontage road backwards 2 miles, is Turfgrass Road, and there are all kinds of birds that go through there. There are some trees, but it's, again, mostly turf fields and ag fields, but there is so much bird diversity and a lot of high numbers of birds depending on the time of year. So one bird that has expanded its range in the last 20 years has been the crested caracara, which is a really fabulous, handsome bird that's been kind of coming up from South Texas. And I have seen caracaras come together in the dusk in the summertime. So I've seen 11 or 12 at once, which there's actually a brief story about that in the book. But a couple years after that, Lynn and I saw about 30 at once. They kind of pack up on these power poles right in the evening, and it's just something to see. So that's another wonderful place to bird, but it really does depend on what kind of birding you're doing. There's great places in North Louisiana as well. So really just depends on what kind of bird you want to see. Yeah, the year I saw my Cape May was 2014. On my to bird list, pretty much anywhere. I think I definitely do have a birding bucket list. The place that, if I had to choose one place in North America to go that I haven't been yet, it's Southeast Arizona, the Tucson area. They've got some mountain ranges that sort of cap off the very northern parts. Mostly they're in Mexico, but the mountains just stretch into the very southeastern part of Arizona. And there are just a lot of really cool birds that are only in that area of the country, and I definitely really want to go there. I would eventually like to try to see 700 North American bird species, and I'm at 530 right now. And I've already started looking at, I'm pretty much looking at the perimeters of the country mostly, like the New England area for puffins and, Key West for things like, now I'm pulling a blank, roseate tern, black noddy, California, West Coast has a lot of birds I have not seen, and of course Southeast Arizona. So I'd love to do something called the Lek Trek, which is in the panhandle of Oklahoma. They have a lot of upland game birds that I have never seen that that do these amazing presentations during the spring. The males do to try to attract females. So there's a lot, and of course, Central America, South America have really amazing birds and super high species diversity. So anywhere I go, I can bird, which is awesome. Yeah, I've got a question from your book. I gather you have a method of targeting a specific bird or a few and travel to that area, studying the target before and on the way. Have your birding methods changed? They definitely have, and I write about some of that in the book. eBird, or electronic bird, that's run by Cornell University. eBird's just a fantastic resource. Their site is chock full of data, and so one of the things that you can do is look at what's called birding hotspots. So they're areas that lots of birders go to, and they people record what they see, what time of year they see it, what species, how many. So you can go and click on a link in eBird and look at everything that's been spotted, at what time of year, all the checklists that people have put in. They've got a frequency histogram, so you can choose a region, whether it's a state or a county, or again, a region of some sort, and all of the birds that have ever been recorded on eBird are in there, along with how frequent they are every week in the year, so that you can really use, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, but you can use data and sightings. If you are a Louisiana birder and you're really interested in getting more connected with other birders, I highly recommend the Listserv Law Bird. Again, if you're not sure how to do it, just send me an email and I can get you connected. But they've got so much information on real-time sightings that people see, and if anyone's teaching a course, you can find out about that. So I think my methods have just changed, where instead of just sort of going out willy-nilly and being like, oh, okay, I'm going to go try to see bird X. I never go out to see bird X unless I've done a whole lot of research in advance and try to maximize my chances, unless I'm trying to chase something that someone else has already seen, in which case I'm looking for GPS coordinates. My neighbor, Carolee Moore, loves to tease me about that. And she's like, I understand if you're like the one who saw the rare bird, but if you're going to chase something that someone else already found, isn't that like saying, oh, I want to see a giraffe today, and going to the zoo and seeing the giraffe? And it's like, no, it's not that easy, because the bird moves, and you may never see it at all. So it's fun. Anyway, yes, I like to do lots of research before I change, and then, before I go looking. And then the other thing I've done is just learned a ton from, I love to bird with people who know, like, a lot more than I do, because I feel like I learn every time I go into the field. And just seeing that if I am trying to identify a bird that I see, and maybe I'm looking for 2 or 3 field marks, elite birders are looking at 6 or 7. And they're not just looking at the bird, they're looking at the behavior, they're looking at the habitat, they're listening. I love to bird by sound myself, but what calls are emanating from the forest, and can you identify what's in the forest without even seeing the birds? So I just think there's a lot to learn, and I would strongly encourage y'all to, if you're not involved yet, to, again, I know I answered that earlier, but look at your local Audubon Society. They have a ton of information that gets you connected. Question was, do you try to get both males and females for each species on your list? That's a good question. I don't typically necessarily try to do that. Some birds you can't tell. I mean, it's really difficult to tell just from looking at them whether it's a male or a female, where other birds it's really clear. So like, if you're around here in the eastern United States and you have cardinals at your bird feeder, you probably notice that the males are super red and the females are more of like a grayish red. So you can look at males and females and you can tell that they are different. But you look at something like a blue jay that shows up to the feeder, and it's pretty hard to just look at a blue jay and be able to tell if it's a male or female because they look alike. So I've never really tried to find specifically birds that are male or female for every species. But with that said, I think females, not always, but generally are not as pretty as males because they need to hide. They need to hide to stay on their nests and make sure their offspring survive. But I think for me, I really appreciate a lot of the females of a lot of species because they are a lot more subtly colored. So there's a bird called a cerulean warbler, and the males are just this brilliant, beautiful blue. They've got a black necklace across their neck, which is a good field mark to know because those birds kind of stick high in the trees, and so you got to kind of learn the bottom part of a warbler instead of the top part. But with that said, the females they're definitely not as bright, but the blue on a cerulean female is just not quite like anything I've ever seen. It's more subtle and it's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I don't specifically try to see both per se, but I'm thrilled to see either. And if the birds look extremely different, I do like to try to get male and female sightings of both. But other interesting lists that you can compile, I birded with a guide in New Mexico a couple of times. His name was Bill West, and he talked about having a C list, which are, which species have you watched copulate for the C list part, and then a D list for which bird species have you seen defecate. So he keeps C lists and D lists, which I think is sort of interesting and funny. I guess we keep lists on everything. So with that, again, I thank y'all so much for sitting out with me this afternoon. And yeah, keep birding. And again, thank you to the LSU Press for hosting these series, and again for making the chapter available for free download. So thank you. And if y'all, again, if you have any questions for me, please just send me an email at marybeth.lima@gmail.com. Thank you.